Roger Daltrey is 82 years old. He built The Who from nothing. He fought for it, bled for it, and stayed loyal to it for 6 decades. But now, he's finally saying things he never said before about Pete Townshend, about Keith Moon's last night, about the money that went missing, and about the night fans died outside their concert and nobody told the band. Daltrey kept quiet for years because he thought silence was loyalty. At 82, he doesn't see it that way anymore. What he just admitted about what really destroyed The Who is the story fans were never supposed to hear. The war baby who built a band. Roger Daltrey came into the world on March 1, 1944, at Hammersmith Hospital in Acton, London. German rockets were falling. Air raid sirens were screaming. His mother gave birth in that fear, with bombs already tearing through nearby Shepherd's Bush. Before Roger was old enough to understand anything, life had already taught him one hard lesson. Nothing was safe for long. That feeling deepened when he and his mother were evacuated to a remote Scottish farm. His father had been called to military service. In those early years, Roger lived with distance and uncertainty. By the time the family returned to Shepherd's Bush, London had changed. He lived at 15 Percy Road. Not far away were 2 other boys who would shape his life forever: Pete Townshend and John Entwistle. Long before the world called them The Who, they were just boys from the same rough pocket of London. In 1955, Roger passed the 11+ exam and went to Acton County Grammar School. He felt out of step immediately, caught between 2 worlds, fitting into neither. He clashed with rules, fought with authority, and was eventually expelled. That moment pushed him toward a life he feared: hard, dull work with a future already decided. At 16, he landed in a sheet metal factory in South Acton. All day he cut, bent, and shaped metal. He later admitted that if music did not work out, he believed he would be trapped in that factory forever, living the same day again and again. But even while working those long days, something else was beginning. Roger could not afford a proper guitar, so he built one himself from a piece of wood and metal scraps from the workshop. With that homemade instrument, he started learning chords from Elvis records. That hunger turned into action in 1961 when, at 17, he formed a skiffle band called the Detours. He personally brought in John Entwistle, and through Entwistle, he found Pete Townshend. The violence that built the sound. Roger's leadership in the early days was tough, physical, and often explosive. Pete Townshend would later describe him as someone who got his way through force. Rehearsals could turn into fights. In one early clash, Roger nearly knocked Townshend out over an argument about arrangements. This wasn't random chaos. It was part of the band's character from the start. By late 1964, the group finally became The Who. Then, in early 1965, Pete Townshend emerged as the main songwriter. Songs like "I Can't Explain," "The Kids Are All Right," and "My Generation Changed Everything." That also meant power inside the band started moving. Roger had built the group, but now Townshend's writing became the creative engine. That tension sharpened around their first real hit, released on January 15, 1965. Success did not bring calm. It made everything more unstable. That led to one of the first major explosions. In late September 1965, during the band's first European tour, things boiled over in Denmark. Roger was furious with Keith Moon for speeding through songs under the influence of pills, making performances sloppy. After a show in Aalborg, Roger found Moon's stash and flushed it down the toilet. Moon came at him in rage, and Roger hit back hard, leaving Keith bloody and shaken. Soon after, Townshend, Moon, and Entwistle voted Roger out of the band he had founded. For Roger, that was humiliating. He had built the group from nothing, and now he was the one being thrown out. For a moment, it looked like The Who might break for good, but the split did not last. The others quickly realized that without him, something crucial was missing. He was brought back within days, and the return came with a rough agreement: less drug use before shows from the others, less violence from Roger. The destruction that kept them broke. By the mid-1960s, The Who had turned gear, smashing into part of the act. Guitars, drums, and amps were destroyed night after night. It made them unforgettable, but it also kept them nearly broke. Roger, who had once built a guitar out of scraps because he was poor, found it painful to watch expensive instruments smashed to pieces. The internal violence did not disappear either. On May 20, 1966, during an argument at London's Ricky Tick Club, Pete Townshend hit Roger over the head with a guitar. Roger answered with one punch that knocked Pete unconscious. Fans watched in shock. Their songs were full of frustration and aggression because the people making them were living those feelings in real time. Around the same time, another ugly truth was coming into view. Their managers, Kit Lambert and Chris Stamp, who had helped build The Who's myth, had also failed to properly pay them. Pete later called them criminals. Audits revealed missing royalties and serious financial damage. Lambert had even used money connected to the band's success to fund a lavish lifestyle, including a palace in Venice. So, while the U-Lu looked huge from the outside, inside they were dealing with betrayal and the feeling that people around them had been feeding off their work for years. Tommy and the Weight of Genius. In May 1969, they released Tommy, the rock opera that changed everything. Pete Townshend wrote nearly all of it, and at the center was Roger Daltrey's voice. On songs like See Me, Feel Me, he brought raw power and vulnerability together. The boy who had feared being trapped forever in a sheet metal factory was now the voice of one of the boldest albums of the era. That led to another big turn when Ken Russell cast Roger in the 1975 film version of Tommy. He did most of his own stunts, suffered burns, endured brutal conditions, and gave a performance that earned a Golden Globe nomination. He even appeared on the cover of Rolling Stone in April 1975. But while Tommy had lifted them, the years that followed brought more danger. By 1972 and 1973, Keith Moon was spiraling deeper into excess. Roger was also dealing with the discovery that money had been stolen from the band. Trust was fraying. That is part of why Quadrophenia, released on October 19, 1973, mattered so much. It was another double album, another huge concept, a portrait of the band breaking apart and trying to understand itself. Keith Moon, the brilliance and the crash. Roger Daltrey once said that Keith Moon seemed to have an addictive personality. He later wondered if some of that restless intensity might have been linked to autism. Whatever the cause, everyone around Moon could see the same thing. There was no middle ground in him. Daltrey described him as someone who could be deeply loving one moment and vicious the next. On November 20, 1973, the W.S.H.U. opened a U.S. tour at the Cow Palace in San Francisco. Before the second song, Moon injected or drank monkey tranquilizer mixed with brandy, an animal sedative. By the time the band reached Won't Get Fooled Again, he collapsed over his tom-toms in the middle of the performance. Roadie Dougal Butler dragged him off, gave him oxygen, and put him through a cold shower. The show was delayed for half an hour. Then, because the band had no choice, they pulled a 19-year-old fan named Scott Halpin out of the audience to play drums for 3 songs. In September 1977, Pete Townshend called Moon in from Malibu for the sessions. For Who Are You? Moon was meant to be getting himself together. Instead, he drifted back toward brandy. Then came one of the saddest moments. In late August 1978, just weeks before he died, Keith Moon attended a private screening of The Kids Are All Right with Roger Daltrey. Watching himself on screen shattered him. Years of excess had changed his face and body. Daltrey later remembered Moon breaking down completely, crying like a child as the reality hit him. On September 7, 1978, the story ended. Keith Moon was in his London flat at 9 Curzon Place. He had been prescribed chlormethiazole, also known as hemineverin, to help curb his drinking. The instruction was clear: no more than 3 tablets a day. Instead, he swallowed 32 tablets, 1 for every year of his life. The next day, his girlfriend found him cold. The verdict was accidental overdose. After his death, Roger Daltrey spoke in a 1979 BBC interview and admitted he still could not properly explain what the loss felt like. Later in life, he would say that one of his biggest regrets was not saving Keith. In a recent interview marking the 45th anniversary of Moon's passing, Daltrey reflected, We lost him with the best of our ignorance. We cared about him. We fought for him. But care without understanding was not enough. The Cincinnati Horror. Little more than a year later, the Who were tied to another tragedy. On Tuesday, December 3, 1979, over 15,000 fans packed the area outside Riverfront Coliseum in Cincinnati. The problem began before the band ever reached the stage. Only a few doors were opened, and they opened late. Thousands started pushing forward at once. By around 7:15 p.m., the pressure in the crowd had become deadly. 11 people were crushed to death. The victims were all between 15 and 27 years old. The worst part was that the band did not know. Local authorities decided not to tell Roger Daltrey, Pete Townshend, or the others before the show. They feared panic. So the Who walked on stage around 8:30 and played a full set. "Who Are You, Baba O'Reilly, Won't Get Fooled Again. My Generation," not knowing that 11 fans were already dead outside. Only after the show were they quietly told backstage. Daltrey was devastated. In a 2024 interview reflecting on the 45th anniversary, he said, "You carry that weight forever. It happened under our name. That never leaves you." The Cincinnati disaster changed live music forever. Venues began rethinking crowd control. Festival seating was restricted or abandoned in many cities. For Daltrey, the tragedy forced a harder question: was carrying on as the Who still worth the danger that came with their power? The collapse of Pete Townshend. While all that was hanging over them, Pete Townshend was coming apart. By the early 1980s, he was badly trapped in drugs and alcohol. Cocaine, drink, and later tranquilizers had become part of his life. At one point, he even said his dependence on Ativan felt worse than heroin. Roger Daltrey watched all of this and decided he had to act. That's why the 1982 tour was presented as the Who's farewell tour. Daltrey later said he framed it that way because Pete kept talking about the pressure of touring, and he was afraid his friend would kill himself if the cycle continued. He did not want to lose Pete the way they had lost Keith. The farewell label was a rescue attempt disguised as a goodbye. On December 16, 1983, Townshend told the band he could no longer write for the WU. He had nothing left to give the machine. He even paid to get out of a Warner Brothers contract rather than keep pushing himself to make another album he did not have in him. For Roger Daltrey, that breakup carried real grief. He poured much of it into his solo album, Parting Should Be Painless, released on February 17, 1984. It became his poorest-selling solo record. Daltrey later defended it by saying, "Yes, it was depressing, because that was exactly where my mind was." The later years and a new purpose. The band reunited for Live Aid in July 1985, playing to 72,000 at Wembley. More tours followed in the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s. But without Keith Moon and later without John Entwistle after his death in 2002, the classic chemistry could never be fully restored. As time passed, Daltrey found a deeper purpose. In 2003, he co-founded Teen Cancer America with Pete Townshend. The aim was simple but important. Teenagers with cancer need spaces where they can feel human, not just treated. Through fundraising, the charity has helped open specialist units across the United States. Daltrey speaks about each new unit almost the way a musician talks about a hit record. It gave him a mission larger than applause. That same reflective side appeared in his memoir, Thanks a Lot, Mr. Kibblewhite, published in September 2018. The title came from the headmaster who expelled him at 15 and told him he would never make anything of his life. Daltrey turned that insult into fuel. The truth at 82. Age comes for everyone. On March 22, 2025, at London's Royal Albert Hall during a Teenage Cancer Trust benefit, Daltrey told the crowd that the joys of getting old meant you go deaf, and that he was also going blind. Then he added a dark joke. "Fortunately, I still have my voice, because otherwise I'd have the full Tommy." It was funny, but brutally honest. Tommy Walker was deaf, dumb, and blind. Now Daltrey was speaking as an old man whose own hearing and sight were slipping. In a candid interview earlier this year, Daltrey finally admitted the truth about what destroyed the WO. It wasn't just the drugs. it wasn't just the money. It wasn't even Keith's death. We destroyed ourselves, he said. The violence, the egos, the pressure, we never learned how to stop. Pete couldn't stop writing. Keith couldn't stop living at full speed. And I couldn't stop pushing. The thing that made us great is the same thing that broke us. He paused, then added, but I don't regret any of it. We gave them something real. Roger Daltrey is 82 years old. He built the Who from nothing. He fought for it, bled for it, and stayed loyal to it for 6 decades. And now, for the first time, he's told the whole truth. The band wasn't destroyed by managers or fame or bad luck. It was destroyed by the same fire that made it immortal. Subscribe to keep uncovering the truth behind the legends. Thanks for watching.